Why should we learn critical thinking? Why is critical thinking so important in our lives? To start with, we are not taught critical thinking either in our education system nor in the corporate organizations. Probably the corporate organizations have not recognized the relevance of critical thinking in making good decisions and being skilled in problem solving. So, critical thinking is not a part of the training agenda of many corporate organizations. But on the other hand, critical thinking is a foundational skill. It is critical for success on the job. Now, it is a foundational skill for what? It is a foundational skill for decision making, for problem solving, and for any kind of planning and strategy. If I want to be good in decision making, my critical thinking skills will be good. The better my critical thinking skills, the better will be my decisions. And similarly, the better and more skilled will I be in solving problems, and the better will be my plans and strategy. Critical thinking is a foundational skill for all these three activities. The World Economic Forum did a survey of employers across the world to ask them as to what are the key skills that they think are required for success on the job, and they asked for this prediction for 5 years starting in October 2020. That is when this survey was done, and it emerged that critical thinking and problem solving are in the top 10 skills that are required for success on the job. And if I look at all the 10 skills that they have said are required for success in the job leading up to 2025, the fact is critical thinking is required for 7 of the top 10 skills. Either it is a separate skill by itself, or it is a foundational skill, or it is an element that needs to be applied in as a part of the skill that they have said. For example, analytical thinking and innovation. Critical thinking is required for analytical thinking. And then they said complex problem solving. Critical thinking is very much required to be able to solve complex problems. In other words, critical thinking is required for almost every important skill, every important job skill for success in the workplace. Then there was a survey done by SHRM to understand as to what are the top 3 missing technical skills and what are the top 3 missing soft skills. Probably they have a larger list, but this is what I've got in the chart. Now, when you look at in the top 3 missing soft skills, 37% is problem solving, critical thinking, innovation and creativity. Critical thinking is critical. So it is among the most important top 3 missing soft skills. Now next we have ability to deal with complexity and ambiguity. The fact is critical thinking skills are required even to be able to deal with complexity and ambiguity. It's an element. It's unless I have critical thinking skills, I will not be able to deal with complexity and ambiguity. And finally, communication. Good communication skills are dependent upon good critical thinking skills. It's only when my thinking is clear and I have cogent ideas, will I also be able to communicate in a cogent and clear manner. So again, critical thinking is foundational for good communication. As an aside, I was not intending to talk about it, but when you look at the top 3 missing technical skills, you see data analysis and data science. Now, for data science and data analysis, the first thing which is non-technical and which is required is critical thinking. What data will I analyze? Okay, what are the variables based on which I will look for correlations, and what are the what kind of data will I look at trends, and if I have these trends, what could that be caused by causal relationships? Okay, establishing causal relationships is again a function of critical thinking. So there is no getting away from the fact that whichever way we look, good critical thinking skills can play a tremendous role in being good at other job skills. The other problem that I have seen is that critical thinking is widely misunderstood. Okay, as to what is critical thinking is not holistically understood. Several times when I asked either in corporate forums or in a forum of students or faculty as to what is it that they think is critical thinking, I have got a varied set of answers. Some of them will say it's out of the box thinking. There are some people who will say it's creative thinking or lateral thinking. Okay, so this is one set of answers, which by the way they're all wrong, because critical thinking is definitely not creative thinking. Yes, critical thinking spurs creative thinking, and critical thinking is required for creative thinking as an element of creative thinking, but it is not critical thinking. The other thing which is not appreciated by many of us is as to what are the skills and concepts that we need to learn in order to be good critical thinkers. Very often I have got people coming to me and saying that they want a session on problem solving or decision making. In effect, that is what they consider to be critical thinking. The point is, decision making and problem solving is only one aspect, as we shall see next, as to what is it exactly is critical thinking and why is it not widely understood. So, in critical thinking, there are two elements. One is how to think critically about an issue, and second is how to think critically. Now, how to think critically about an issue is what we are doing all the time. If we are evaluating various decision options and making a decision, or if we are faced with a problem and then we go about trying to solve the problem, we are effectively doing critical thinking, accepting that by and large, our traditional way of making decisions or solving problems is there is a problem and then a solution comes to mind based on our background information, based on any experience that we have or based on what we have read, and then we go about just evaluating that solution. Whereas we should start with evidence, analyze the evidence, and then come at possible solutions and then evaluate the solutions. But the mind uses system one thinking by and large in problem solving and decision making, which is why we could be missing out several causations for the problem, or our evaluation of decision options, or even the number of options that are generated could be inadequate. More about how to use a critical thinking framework and what are the elements in the critical thinking framework, maybe in some other video. But if you wish, you can make a note of these elements, and whenever you're solving a problem, see whether you start with the evidence, analyze the evidence, and for any solution that you finalize, okay, articulate your assumptions and implications, and if there are multiple stakeholders, examine whether the stakeholders have the same perspective or have a different view, and in these three modules, in these three elements, if you find, very often you're likely to find that your assumptions may want you to go back and either verify the data, look for data, because the assumptions are critical and you don't want to go without knowing what the actual data is, and sometimes you may turn around and find that the implications of the solution that you have is not acceptable. There's a lot of virtue in using a framework like this, and using a framework like this does not prevent the use of other frameworks. For example, if you're trying to find out the root cause, now in your analysis, you can use a fishbone diagram, okay? Similarly, in your analysis, you can do a SWOT analysis. So when it comes to analysis, depending on your domain, you can use multiple frameworks. All this framework tells you are the elements that we need to consider, the different dimensions of problem that we need to consider when we are sitting down to solve a problem, make a decision or a plan or a strategy. Now, the next thing is we're going to talk about how to think critically. Okay, what do we need to learn for how to think critically? And before I get down to what we need to learn how to think critically, a more fundamental question is, what is the relationship between how to think critically and how to think critically about an issue? Am I saying that I don't know how to think critically? I don't know how to think at all? Maybe yes, maybe no. I will not answer that either way. But the relationship between how to think critically and how to think critically about an issue is the same relationship as between science and engineering. I need to be good in math, physics and chemistry if I want to be a good mechanical engineer or a good civil engineer. Unless I am good in my sciences, I cannot apply them and become good at engineering. Similarly, unless I know how to think critically, I will not be able to think critically about an issue with any level of effectiveness. Now, the question is, what is it that I need to learn in order to be able to think critically? That is, how to think critically. What do I need to learn? Logical reasoning is central. Second is credibility. I need to be able to evaluate the credibility of sources and claims, because we take several premises, several reasons and several statements and several claims from different authorities, and we use them as part of our reasoning for making decisions or making plans and strategies. So we need to be able to evaluate credibility, understand how to evaluate credibility and what can go wrong. Then we need to have clear thinking and communications. More important, we need to understand what can go wrong with clear thinking and communication and derail critical thinking. Believe me, there are several things that can go wrong with clear thinking and communication. So while it might look very obvious that, okay, I have a good vocabulary and I can construct sentences grammatically, how can my thinking be unclear? It will be a little surprising when I talk about the elements that can lead to unclear thinking and derail critical thinking. Similarly, I need to understand rhetoric and rhetorical devices. I need to understand fallacies, which are errors in reasoning. I need to understand what is a cognitive bias and the various cognitive biases. Because unless I understand these things, I am unlikely to be able to reason correctly. There will be no precision in my reasoning, and I might succumb to arguments which uses emotion as the primary reason, or a fallacy as part of the reasoning, and I may not recognize it, or I may systematically make very poor judgments in several situations because of various cognitive biases such as the framing bias, or the confirmation bias, or the availability bias, etc. So I need to learn all these things. It is only when I understand all these elements that I will know how to think critically, and then this knowledge can get applied on how to think critically about an issue. Without this knowledge, any amount of trying to do problem solving and decision making, any amount of courses that we do will be trying to do engineering without knowing the science behind it. You will know how to construct a bridge, etc., etc. The elements, you may have the designs, but we will not understand it. Okay, we will just, maybe that particular bridge you're able to construct, but when you're presented with the requirements for the new design, we will not be able to do it because we don't understand that. These were some of the reasons for us to learn critical thinking.